Ethan Cole wasn't expecting anyone at his door at 11:30 on a Friday night, especially not Lily Harper. She stood outside in an oversized gray hoodie, her blonde hair tied into a messy knot, eyes swollen like she'd either been crying for hours or hadn't slept in days. Maybe both. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the porch roof behind her, and Manhattan traffic hummed faintly in the distance. Ethan tightened his grip on the doorknob. Lily was 24, his neighbor's daughter, and the last person who should have been standing at his apartment door looking completely wrecked. "I need a husband by Sunday." Ethan blinked once, then twice. "What?" "I'm serious." Her voice cracked halfway through. "I didn't know where else to go." Inside the apartment, a cartoon played softly on the TV while Ethan's 6-year-old son Noah slept sideways on the couch under a dinosaur blanket. The scent of grilled cheese still lingered in the air. It was such a normal night. And somehow, in one sentence, Lily had destroyed all of it. Ethan looked down the hallway toward the elevator. "Does your father know you're here?" Her jaw tightened immediately. No, that told him enough. Richard Harper wasn't just rich. The man was New York rich. Old money billionaire rich. The kind of man who wore calm smiles while controlling entire rooms with a single sentence. Ethan had lived across from the Harpers for almost 3 years, and even he knew the atmosphere around that family felt cold enough to freeze people alive. Lily looked nothing like her father tonight. No makeup, no confidence, no attitude, just panic. "I know this sounds insane," she whispered, "but if I don't get married by Sunday, my father's going to force me into something I can't do." Ethan stared at her. Part of him wanted to shut the door immediately. Not because he hated her. Honestly, he barely knew her. But because trouble always came attached to billionaire families. Expensive trouble. And Ethan had spent the last 4 years trying to protect Noah from chaos. After his wife died, chaos nearly destroyed him. "Lily," he said carefully, "whatever this is, you should call a friend. Or a lawyer." "I already did." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out people disappear when my father gets involved." That landed harder than Ethan expected. For a second, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Then Lily finally looked up at him fully, and Ethan saw something underneath the panic. Fear, real fear. Not spoiled rich girl drama, the kind that kept people awake at night. "My father wants me to marry Daniel Mercer on Sunday," she said quietly. "Business merger, family arrangement, the whole disgusting package." Ethan knew the name immediately. Daniel Mercer. The guy had a reputation all over Manhattan. Charming in public, rotten in private. You can just say no. "You don't understand my father." Her eyes watered again. "He controls everything. My apartment, my accounts, my company shares, even the foundation my mother left me. If I refuse, he takes all of it and buries me in court for years." Ethan crossed his arms slowly. "So, what exactly are you asking me?" Lily hesitated. Then she said the most dangerous sentence possible. "Marry me instead." The apartment suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Ethan almost laughed out of pure disbelief. But Lily wasn't joking, not even close. And somehow, deep down, Ethan already knew this night was about to change both of their lives forever. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at Lily like she had lost her mind. Or like he had. "No," he finally said. Simple, clean, final. "Sected it. I figured," she whispered. Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. Behind him, Noah shifted on the couch, mumbling in his sleep. That small sound pulled Ethan back into reality fast. "This is insane," he said quietly. "You show up at my door and ask me to marry you like it's, what, a weekend favor?" "I don't have time," she said quickly. "I've been trying to find another way for weeks. There isn't one." Ethan shook his head. "There is always another way. Not when your father is Richard Harper." The name hung in the air again, heavier this time. Lily stepped closer but stopped just short of entering his apartment without permission, like she was still trying to respect boundaries even while falling apart. "I'm not asking you to love me," she said. "I'm not even asking you to want this. I'm asking you to help me survive Sunday." Ethan looked at her more carefully now. She wasn't dressed like a billionaire's daughter. No designer clothes, no polished image, just exhaustion and fear wrapped in a hoodie. There was something almost stripped down about her tonight, like she had already lost too much to keep pretending. Still, marriage? To a stranger? To protect her from her own father? Ethan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You realize how that sounds, right?" "I do. And you came anyway. I didn't have anywhere else to go." That line stayed with him longer than he liked. Silence stretched between them again. Finally, Ethan spoke more carefully. "What happens after Sunday? After whatever this is supposed to fix?" Lily hesitated. "That depends," she said softly, "on whether I'm still free by then." That was not the answer he wanted. He glanced again at Noah on the couch, his son's small chest rising and falling calmly, completely unaware that life outside that apartment was anything but safe. Ethan lowered his voice. "I have a kid." "I know," Lily said immediately. "I've seen you with him. That's why I came here." That made him pause. "You think I'd drag my son into your family's mess?" "I think you're the only person I know who wouldn't do this for money." That hit differently, because she was right. Ethan Cole wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He was just a single dad trying to keep his life stable after losing everything once already. And that made him dangerous in a different way. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Just read it," she said. Ethan didn't take it at first, but he did look at it. At the top, in cold legal font, was a marriage agreement draft. And beneath it, a clause that made his stomach tighten. "This isn't just a fake marriage," he muttered. Lily's voice dropped. "No, it's a shield." Ethan looked at her again, and for the first time he realized this wasn't desperation anymore. It was war. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever loved someone with a truly pure heart, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss these emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Not really. He sat at the kitchen table long after Lily left, the marriage agreement sitting in front of him like a loaded weapon. The apartment was quiet again, but it didn't feel normal anymore. It felt like something had cracked open inside it. Noah's soft breathing from the couch was the only thing keeping Ethan grounded. He reread the clause again and again. There were conditions, boundaries, time limits, legal protections. It wasn't a romantic proposal. It wasn't even emotional manipulation. It was structured like an escape plan. By 3:12 a.m., Ethan finally leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. "This is madness," he whispered to himself, but his mind wasn't fully rejecting it anymore. Because beneath all the danger, there was something else. Lily wasn't lying. The fear in her eyes had been too real, and Ethan had spent enough time around rich families after his wife's death to recognize one truth. Money didn't always mean safety. Sometimes it meant cages with golden bars. The next morning, Lily was still there, not inside his apartment, sitting on the hallway floor like she didn't trust herself to leave. When Ethan opened the door, she looked up immediately. "You didn't leave," she said softly. "I was thinking," he replied. She stood up slowly. "That's not a no." Ethan studied her face again. Same exhaustion, same tension in her shoulders. But now there was something else too. Hope. That scared him more than anything. "I need answers first," he said. Lily nodded quickly. "Anything." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him so Noah wouldn't hear. "Why me?" Ethan asked. "Out of everyone in Manhattan, why the guy across the hall with a kid and a normal job?" Lily swallowed. "Because you're invisible to my father." That wasn't what he expected. She continued. "He knows all my friends, all my business contacts, all the men in his circle. But you?" She gave a faint, tired breath. You're just Ethan Cole, single dad, apartment 6B, no scandals, no ties to his world. Ethan didn't like how calculated that sounded. And that makes me what? Convenient? It makes you safe, she corrected. Safe. That word didn't belong anywhere near this situation. Ethan leaned against the wall, thinking hard. And Daniel Mercer? He asked again. Lily's expression darkened instantly. He's not just an arranged marriage option, she said quietly. He's a contract. My father is trying to merge me into his company through him. Once it happens, I lose control of everything permanently. Ethan frowned. That's illegal. In theory, she said. In practice, my father writes the rules before anyone else notices the game has started. A long silence followed. Ethan looked back at his door again, at Noah, at the life he had built from nothing. Then back at Lily. You're asking me to risk my life, he said. Lily didn't deny it. Yes, that single word changed everything, because it was honest. Ethan exhaled slowly. I need 24 hours, he said finally. Lily nodded, like she was afraid to breathe too hard. But as Ethan stepped back inside, one thought wouldn't leave him alone. Whatever was coming on Sunday, it wasn't just a fake marriage anymore. It was survival. By evening, Ethan had already decided something he didn't want to admit out loud. He was getting pulled in. Not because he trusted Lily fully, not because he believed this was safe, but because walking away now felt like leaving someone to drown while pretending he didn't hear the noise. Lily waited in the hallway again that night. Same spot, same silence. When Ethan opened the door, she didn't rush him. She just watched his face carefully, reading whatever answer he hadn't said yet. I'll hear you out, he said finally, but I'm setting rules. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she had been holding her breath for hours. Okay, she said immediately. No surprises, no hidden details, and if I say stop, it stops. She nodded again. Agreed. And my son stays out of this completely. That made her pause for half a second, then she agreed softer. Of course. Ethan stepped outside and closed the door behind him. For the first time, Lily didn't look like she was collapsing. She looked like she was preparing. Start from the beginning, Ethan said. Lily leaned against the wall, staring at the floor for a moment before speaking. It started 6 months ago, she said. My father brought up Daniel Mercer again. More serious this time. He said it was time to secure the family's future. Ethan listened without interrupting. I refused, she continued. Politely at first, then firmly. Then, things changed. What changed? Ethan asked. Lily's voice lowered. My access started disappearing. First my foundation funds, then my company voting rights, then my apartment lease was quietly transferred to a holding company under his name. Ethan frowned. He can't just do that. He can, she said, because everything is technically legal when you sign the right things at the right time. That part hit harder than it should have. She looked up at him then. And then Daniel started showing up everywhere, she added. Not directly threatening, never openly, just present, at events, at meetings, like I was already part of his life. Ethan crossed his arms slowly. And your father allowed that? Lily gave a small, bitter smile. He encouraged it. Silence stretched again. New York traffic echoed faintly below them, distant and indifferent. Ethan finally asked the question he didn't want to ask. If I do this, what exactly am I signing up for? Lily hesitated. Then she said, You'll be my legal husband on paper, publicly, for at least 3 months. Ethan raised an eyebrow. 3 months? Until I can secure control of my trust fund through a legal loophole only my mother's old lawyer knows about. That sounded dangerously specific. And if it doesn't work? Ethan asked. Lily looked at him directly. Then I lose everything, she said. And I become exactly what my father designed. That sentence didn't need explanation. Ethan looked down the hallway again. At his apartment door, at Noah's future, then back at Lily. This is bigger than I thought, he said quietly. Lily nodded once. It always was. A long pause followed. Then Ethan said the words that changed everything. I need to meet him. Lily's eyes tightened instantly. Who? Your father. For the first time, fear flickered across her face in a new way. Because she understood what that meant. Once Ethan Cole stepped into Richard Harper's world, there would be no easy way out. Lily said no immediately. The word came out sharp, almost panicked. You don't understand what you're asking, she said. Meeting my father isn't like meeting a normal person. He doesn't talk to people, he evaluates them. Ethan stayed calm. Good. Then he'll evaluate me. That's exactly the problem, she snapped. He doesn't see people as individuals. He sees leverage, weaknesses, exit points. Then I guess I'll find out where I stand, Ethan interrupted. Silence hit between them. The hallway suddenly felt colder. Lily stared at him, like she was trying to figure out if he was brave or just reckless. You're doing this for me? She asked quietly. Ethan shook his head once. I'm doing this so I know what I'm getting my son near. That was the truth, and it made her go quiet. 2 hours later, Ethan found himself standing in front of a building he didn't belong in. Harper Tower. Glass, steel, and power stacked into the Manhattan skyline like a warning. Everything about it looked too clean, too controlled, like nothing messy had ever been allowed inside. Lily stood beside him, tense. You still don't have to do this, she said one last time. Ethan glanced at her. Neither do you. That didn't get a response. Inside, the lobby was silent in a way that felt expensive. People moved with purpose, no wasted motion, no emotion on their faces. They didn't take the elevator to a reception desk. They went straight up, 38th floor, executive suite. When the doors opened, Richard Harper was already waiting. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. He just looked at Ethan like a file being opened. Richard Harper. So, Richard said calmly, folding his hands. This is the man my daughter chose to confuse me with. Lily stiffened beside Ethan. Ethan didn't flinch. He stepped forward slightly. I didn't come here to confuse anyone. Richard tilted his head. Interesting. Most men in your position would start with excuses. I don't have excuses, Ethan replied. I have questions. A faint pause. Richard studied him more closely now, like recalculating something. You're not part of my world, Richard said. I know. You don't have wealth. No. You don't have influence. Correct. Richard leaned back slightly, almost amused. Then tell me why I should allow my daughter to waste my time on you. Ethan didn't hesitate. Because I'm not asking for your permission, he said. The room shifted instantly. Lily's breath caught. Richard's expression sharpened. And for the first time since entering the building, Ethan realized something very clear. He hadn't walked into a conversation. He had walked into a test, and he had just passed the first dangerous step without knowing what the second one would cost. The silence after Ethan's words stretched longer than it should have. Richard Harper didn't react immediately. No anger, no raised voice, just a slow, measured stare that made the room feel smaller. Then he stood up, not quickly, not aggressively, like someone who already knew how this would end. So, Richard said, walking around his desk, you're the man who thinks he can step into my daughter's life and rewrite my plans. Ethan stayed still. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. I'm trying to stop her from being forced into something she doesn't want. Lily looked between them, visibly tense. Richard stopped a few feet from Ethan, close enough now that the difference between their worlds was impossible to ignore. You think this is about desire? Richard asked. It isn't. It's about survival. Power doesn't care what you want. Ethan didn't look away. Then, maybe it's time someone reminded you that she's not a piece on a board. That line landed harder than anything before it. For the first time, Richard's expression shifted slightly, something like irritation or maybe curiosity. You have a child, Richard said suddenly. Ethan blinked once. Yes. That explains your tone, Richard said. Men with children tend to confuse protection with control. Ethan's jaw tightened. No, men with children understand what control looks like when it's taken from them. A flicker of silence. Lily's eyes widened slightly, like she hadn't expected Ethan to go that far. Richard turned slowly back toward his desk. "You're not her husband," he said flatly. "Not yet," Ethan replied. That earned a pause. Richard glanced at Lily. "And you think this arrangement changes anything?" Lily finally spoke, voice steady but tense. "It gives me time." Richard smiled faintly. "Time is what weak people ask for when they don't have leverage." Ethan stepped forward half a step. "Then give her leverage." That made Richard look at him again. Properly this time. A long, evaluating stare. Then Richard walked back behind his desk and pressed a button. The glass wall behind him dimmed slightly. "You're right about one thing," he said. "This isn't just about marriage." Lily stiffened immediately. "Father." Richard raised a hand. She stopped instantly. Ethan noticed that. Control without effort. That was the real power in the room. Richard continued. "Daniel Mercer is not just a partner option." Ethan's expression tightened. "He's a solution," Richard said calmly, "to a problem I've been managing for years." Lily's voice broke slightly. "What problem?" Richard didn't answer her immediately. Instead, he looked at Ethan. "As of this moment," he said quietly, "you are no longer just a stranger involved in my daughter's decision." A pause. "You're now part of the problem, too." The air in the room changed completely, and Ethan realized something cold and immediate. This was never about a fake marriage. It was about a war already in motion, one he had just been pulled directly into. The words part of the problem didn't leave the room. They stayed there, hanging in the air like something permanent. Ethan didn't move, but something in him shifted, quiet, controlled, alert. Lily looked shaken now, not dramatic, not loud, just a small crack in her composure, like she was realizing the weight of what she had pulled him into. Richard returned to his seat slowly. "You came here for clarity," Richard said. "Now you have it." Ethan kept his voice steady. "That wasn't clarity, that was a warning." Richard nodded once. "Same thing, depending on how long you survive." Lily stepped forward slightly. "Father, stop talking like he's disposable." That got a brief glance from Richard. "You think I'm the threat here?" he asked her calmly. "I'm the only reason you've had stability for 24 years. Lily shook her head. "You call it stability. I call it control." Silence tightened again. Ethan finally spoke. "If this is about control, then explain something to me." Richard tilted his head slightly, like allowing him permission. "Why Daniel Mercer?" That name landed differently now. Not just as a fiancé option, but as a key piece in something bigger. Richard leaned back. "Because he understands structure." "That's not an answer," Ethan said. "It is," Richard replied. "You just don't like it." Ethan didn't back down. "You're using your daughter as a transaction." Lily flinched at the word. Richard didn't. Instead, he said something colder. "I'm protecting a legacy." Ethan let out a slow breath. "At what cost?" Richard's gaze sharpened slightly. "At whatever cost is necessary." That was the moment Ethan understood something clearly. This wasn't emotional for Richard Harper. It was strategic. Always had been. Lily's voice lowered. "You're really going to go through with it? Force me into this?" Richard looked at her, almost tired. "You think I'm forcing you. I think I'm guiding you away from chaos disguised as freedom." Ethan stepped closer to Lily slightly, not touching her, just positioning himself there. A silent decision. Richard noticed it immediately. A faint smile appeared. "There it is," Richard said. "The instinct to protect." Ethan didn't respond. Richard continued. "Let me be clear. If you proceed with this arrangement, this marriage idea, you will both be watched." Lily froze. "Watched?" Richard nodded. "Closely." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "By who?" Richard didn't answer directly. Instead, he pressed another button. A screen behind him lit up. A photo appeared. Daniel Mercer. But not alone. Beside him were financial records, offshore accounts, and sealed legal documents labeled under names Ethan didn't recognize. Lily stepped back slightly. "What is that?" Richard spoke calmly. "That is what happens when you think marriage is the end of the story." A pause. "It's usually the beginning of something much worse." Ethan stared at the screen. And for the first time, he realized Daniel Mercer wasn't just a groom in a forced arrangement. He was connected to something far deeper, something dangerous. And now Ethan wasn't just protecting Lily anymore. He was standing in the middle of something he didn't fully understand, but was already too deep to walk away from. The room stayed silent after the screen went dark. No one spoke for a moment. Not Lily, not Ethan, not even Richard Harper. Something had changed in the air, like a door had quietly locked somewhere, and none of them had noticed who turned the key. Ethan finally looked away from the screen. "So this isn't about family at all," he said. "It's business, power, something bigger." Richard didn't deny it. "That's how the world works," Richard replied. "You're just seeing it properly for the first time." Lily's voice shook slightly. "You never told me any of this." Richard's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Because you wouldn't have understood it then." Ethan turned to Lily. "You're not just being pushed into a marriage." She swallowed hard. "I'm being used." Richard didn't react to that phrasing, which, in a way, confirmed it. Ethan exhaled slowly. His mind was running faster now, connecting pieces he didn't have full access to. Daniel Mercer wasn't just a fiancé option. He was a link in a chain Ethan couldn't yet see the end of. And somehow, Ethan had been pulled into the middle of it simply by standing in front of the wrong door on a Friday night. Lily stepped closer to Ethan now, voice quieter. "Are you going to back out?" Ethan looked at her, then at Richard, then back at the screen one last time. "No," he said. Lily's breath caught. Richard's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened again. Ethan continued, steady now. "But the deal changes." Richard raised a brow. "Does it?" "Yes," Ethan said. "If I'm doing this, I'm not just your daughter's arrangement. I want full legal protection for her. No hidden transfers, no sudden contract changes. Everything transparent." A pause. "And I want access," Ethan added. "To what?" Richard asked. "To whatever this is really about." Silence again. Longer this time. Then Richard slowly leaned back. For the first time, there was something almost like approval in his eyes. Not warmth, but recognition. "You're either very brave," Richard said quietly, "or very stupid." Ethan didn't respond. Lily looked between them, still shaken. But something in her expression shifted too, like she was realizing Ethan wasn't backing away anymore. Richard finally spoke again. Ethan nodded once. "Agreed." Lily turned to him immediately. "Ethan," he looked at her. "I know what I'm doing." But he didn't fully. Not yet. Because as they left Harper Tower together, the city lights of New York stretched endlessly in front of them, and Ethan realized something heavier than fear settling in his chest. This wasn't a fake marriage anymore. It was a contract written in silence, power, and secrets no one had fully admitted out loud. And somewhere deep inside it, Lily wasn't just being saved. She was being watched. And Ethan Cole had just stepped into a world where walking away was no longer an option. Sometimes people don't walk into danger because they are reckless. They walk in because they refuse to ignore someone else's silent cry for help. Trust is not built in comfort, but in choices made under pressure. When truth is messy and fear is real. In the end, we learn that protecting someone doesn't always mean saving them alone. It means standing beside them even when you don't understand the full storm yet. And that courage often begins the moment you decide not to walk away.